The sand doesn't hide things. The sand buries them. Right now, beneath 18 meters of silt and salt water off Egypt's northern coast, there is a city. Not ruins, not scattered fragments. A city, with streets still laid in their original grid, temple walls still standing to half their height, harbor mooring rings still bolted to stone quaysides where sailors tied their ropes 2,000 years ago. 10,000 people lived here. They prayed here, traded here, raised children here, with the absolute confidence of people whose grandparents had done exactly the same. Today, through modern archaeology and AI reconstruction, we peel back 4,000 years of sand and silence to reveal 5 staggering truths about Thonis Heracleion, the lost Egyptian city so completely swallowed by the earth that for 2 millennia, the civilized world dismissed it as myth. They were wrong. Imagine you are a Phoenician merchant. It is 480 BCE. 3 weeks at sea, your cedar-hulled ship carrying Cypriot copper ingots, riding long swells that flatten and turn brackish at the Nile Delta's mouth. You are exhausted, salt-caked, running low on the dried figs that have been your primary food for 11 days. And then you see it, Thonis Heracleion. 2 names, 1 city, no accident. Thonis was its Egyptian soul, ancient and priestly. Heracleion was its Greek face, earned because traders had come here so long, they'd named it themselves. Every ship entering or leaving Egypt was legally required to stop here first. Register your cargo, pay your dues, be counted. There was no other legal gateway into the wealthiest civilization on Earth. IEASM excavations have since mapped the submerged zone across over 110 square kilometers. A metropolitan scale no ancient text had adequately described. And the physical reality archaeology confirmed is extraordinary. Thonis Heracleion was not built beside the water. It was built on the water, constructed across low-lying alluvial islands, laced by engineered canals, anchored to ground composed primarily of compacted Nile silt over water-saturated sand. For nearly 1,000 years, that improbable foundation held. But when archaeologists finally mapped those sediment layers, what they found wasn't simply the geology of a sunken city. It was evidence that this city had been geologically doomed from the moment its first foundation stone was laid. And in 1,000 years of continuous habitation, not one person had ever understood that. The year is 380 BCE, the 30th dynasty, the last truly Egyptian royal dynasty that will ever rule this land, has just begun. Walk with me into the city at its absolute peak. You are a sesh, a temple scribe attached to the sanctuary of Amun Gareb. You wake before the sun in a mud brick house behind the Eastern Canal embankment. Through your window, the water below reflects the final stars. The harbor is already alive. Hollow percussion of hulls against stone quays. Dockmasters calling cargo lists in the rapid Aramaic that has become the waterfront's working language, regardless of what anyone prays in. At the harbor master's registry, you record the morning's arrivals. 14 vessels, grain barges from Upper Egypt, a Corinthian merchant ship, suspiciously well-armed for civilian registry, declaring olive oil. Cedar resin from Lebanon. A single consignment note, written in a Greek hand, for 2 live baboons destined for a nobleman whose taxes are always, you note, with professional appreciation, paid on time. The genius of Thonis Heracleion was precisely this frictionless plurality. Egyptian priests processed through streets where Greek merchants negotiated futures contracts on next season's grain. The temple of Amun Gareb stood in direct sightline of a Greek sanctuary to Heracles. 2 religions, 2 architectural vocabularies, 2 understandings of the divine, operating in the same city block, with the ease of people who decided long ago that trade matters more than theology. At midday, watching a grain barge ease toward open water, the city feels not merely prosperous, it feels permanent. Your grandfather said the temple looked exactly the same in his day. His grandfather said the same. Some things are older than memory. The priests of Amun-Gareb kept their most sacred cult objects in a place they were certain was beyond any human threat. What they could not protect those objects from had no enemy's face, no invading army's name, and no prayer in the ancient world had ever been written to address it. You are that diver. The year is 2001. The water is cold. Visibility is poor. Your torch is the only warm thing for 18 meters in any direction. And the face looking up at you, a pharaoh carved in red Aswan granite, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, has not been seen by any human eye since the 2nd century BCE. You are the first. When Frank Gaudio and the IEASM team began sonar surveys of Abu Qir Bay in 1999, the returns showed organized geometry, right angles, parallel lines, regular spacing, the unmistakable signature of deliberate urban planning. What followed was one of the most significant underwater excavations in recorded history. 64 ancient ships still in their harbor berths, over 700 ancient anchors, colossal statues of pharaohs and the god Hapi lying exactly where they fell, gold jewelry still clasped, bronze cult instruments, and a decree of Pharaoh Nectanebo I, dated to the early 4th century BCE, inscribed with the name Thonis in clear hieroglyphic text. The myth had a street address. Sub-bottom acoustic profiling then detected occupation layers beneath the submerged city. Pre-dynastic material suggesting human settlement extending back 5,000 years or more. Not one lost city, layered civilizations, each built on the memory of the one before. And in the Temenos, the sacred lake at the temple's heart, divers recovered sealed now shrines, their lids still fitted, their interior cult objects, bronze statuettes, gold ritual vessels, faience amulets, still arranged precisely as a priest's hands had left them. Not stored, not packed for safekeeping. Arranged, positioned for a ceremony about to begin. The priest who arranged those objects walked away expecting to return within the hour. He never came back. No one ever came back. And those objects stayed exactly where he left them. In the dark, still in position, still ready, for 2,000 years. If that weight, a civilization so alive, so completely blindsided by its own ending, fills you with the same haunting awe it fills us, type "still waiting" in the comments. Because what ended this city left no enemy to blame, no god to pray to, and no warning that any living person recognized in time. Sometime between 200 and 150 BCE, Thonis Heracleion began to die. Geological evidence suggests not a single catastrophic instant, but a cascade, each failure triggering the next. The mechanism is now understood in precise, clinical detail. The city was constructed on liquefiable substrate, water-saturated Nile Delta sediment that, under sufficient dynamic stress, would undergo a phase transition. A significant seismic event, an exceptional Nile flood loading the delta with abnormal hydraulic pressure, or simply the cumulative weight of a millennium of monumental stone pressing down on ground never truly solid. Any of these could trigger it. The water held in the sediment's pores would be expelled upward. Load-bearing friction between particles would fail. The ground would stop behaving as earth and begin behaving as a slow, cold, irresistible liquid. The buildings would not burn. They would not be conquered. They would sink. You are standing in the temple forecourt when it begins. Not an explosion, not a roar. The paving stones beneath your sandals move. one slow shudder like the ground clearing its throat. You look down. The limestone joints are weeping silty water. The sacred lake, always perfectly still at this hour, is rippling in a pattern that has nothing to do with wind. Across the harbor, a captain feels it in his hull before he understands it. Mooring lines going slack, then snapping taut in a direction that makes no sense. He has worked this harbor for 20 years. He starts shouting before he knows why, district by district, temple by temple. The sediment islands on which 10,000 people had built their entire world dissolved at their margins. The boundary between land and water, treated for 1,000 years as permanent geographical fact, ceased to exist. Gone. The sea closed above Thonis Heracleion so completely that within a generation, sailors had no memory of what lay beneath their keels. Within 5 centuries, educated scholars were certain the city had never existed at all. It would stay that way for 2,000 years, until a research vessel dropped a sonar array into those quiet waters, and the silence answered back with the geometry of a city. This is where the story changes completely. Between 2022 and 2025, the IEASM, working with AI-assisted photogrammetric mapping platforms and sub-bottom profiling technology of a resolution that did not exist a decade ago, began constructing something with no precedent in archaeological history: a complete, evidence-based digital resurrection of Thonis Heracleion. Not an artist's impression, not an educated guess. A model built from the sonar signatures of 64 sunken ships, photogrammetric scans of thousands of recovered objects, sediment core analysis across hundreds of excavation points, and AI algorithms capable of reading the angle and position of collapsed structural elements to calculate, with measurable confidence, what the standing building had looked like. What the model revealed silenced the research team. Archaeological modeling now suggests the city supported a population of 15 to 20,000 people at its peak, substantially larger than any prior estimate. The temple of Amun-Garab's processional way extended nearly 300 meters from harbor gate to inner sanctuary. The structure's orientation and subsidiary chapel positioning, run through astronomical modeling software, revealed alignments consistent with key dates in the Egyptian religious calendar, including the annual inundation festival on which the city's entire economic existence depended. This city was not merely constructed, it was composed. Every structural decision in dialogue with the river, the sky, and a religious understanding of time so sophisticated that we require machine learning to decode its full implications 2,500 years later. Think about what that means. Every object recovered from that sacred lake had passed through a dozen civilizations before reaching the priest's hands, and AI spectral analysis has traced their material origins to mines in Nubia, timber traditions from the Lebanese coast, and metalworking consistent with Eastern Mediterranean and Near Eastern craft traditions reaching across the ancient world. Thonis Heracleion was not merely Egypt's customs gateway, it was the place where the ancient world's commercial nervous system connected to its beating heart. But the most profound thing AI reconstruction has returned to us is not the city's scale, or its alignments, or its global reach. It is the quality of its normality. The people of Thonis Heracleion did not experience themselves as inhabitants of history. They knew their canal, their neighbors, their tax obligations. They worried about the Nile's mood and the price of cedar resin and whether the new harbor master was honest. They loved their children with the exhausting daily love of people who do not know they will not grow old here. They were, in every way that time cannot change, us. And they vanished, without warning, without an ending anyone saw coming. They simply ceased to be in the place where they had always been. What does Thonis Heracleion ask of us? Perhaps this: civilization is not a fortress, it is a conversation. between human ambition and the physical world, between what we insist on building and what the earth is willing to sustain. For 1,000 years, the earth held this city, its temples, its canal walls, its sealed shrines, its families. And then, without announcement, it stopped. Every city you walk through today is conducting that same negotiation. Every foundation rests on an assumption the earth has not formally agreed to. Every skyline is, in geological time, a temporary declaration. The sand doesn't hide things. The sand buries them. But for the first time in 2,000 years, we have built instruments that see through salt water in silt and silence, and machines that reconstruct a living city from the geometry of its own collapse. And what they have given back is not a monument to loss. It is a mirror held up from the deep, showing us not just who they were, but how quietly, how completely, a world can be erased by the very ground it trusted. If this journey has left you with that weight, Forgotten Ages is exactly where you belong. Subscribe and join those who refuse to let history stay buried, because the past is not over.